Star Trek fans out there? Stargate fans? Orville fans? Space fans? Gremlin fans? I hear the Gremlin fans. Gerry fans? I love that. There'll be none of that. There'll be none of that. To everyone here in attendance at Dublin Comic Con and for everybody at home, please welcome to the stage. Oh, this is just a big treat for me. Robert Picardo!
You faked me out by pausing before my name. I was already on.
I did because I got a bit starstruck, I suppose. I was like,
well, should we sit down?
Yes, we shall, yes.
On the couch?
Yeah.
I could lay down. You could analyze me.
Yeah,
No. Sit over here. There we go.
I don't think I'm the doctor.
What a beautiful auditorium this is. It's really pretty. And the green seats are because of Ireland, right? Because it rains so much in here. The seats are green. I'm sorry, it was a lame joke, but it's a Sunday, guys. I'm warming up. Nice to see you. Who's had a pint of Guinness today? Nobody. Good. Neither have I. One guy.
One guy.
One guy. Good for you. I want to hang with you. Where are you? I want to hang with you.
This is not your first visit to Ireland.
No, I believe a fan told me it's my third visit here. But actually, I think it's my fourth. I think I came in the late 90s. I came and did a signing at Forbidden Planet. So I think I did, and then I came again in, I think, like 2008. And then I came in something called Arcade Con in 2014, and now I'm back for this. And this is the biggest convention I've ever done here. And you guys have the distinction of being the last convention I'll do before I start shooting on Starfleet Academy.
I don't think they heard about that.
Oh, yeah.
No, I don't think they heard about that. So have you done a bit of exploring while you're here?
Yes. Well, I got here Thursday and was pretty tired, but I went immediately on Friday from the sacred to the profane. I went from St. Patrick's Church to the Jameson Distillery tour. St. Patrick's, walked through Temple Bar and Grafton area, went to the Brazen Head for lunch, which for being the oldest pub apparently in Dublin, had great food, I thought. You'd think the oldest pub would just rest on their laurels, but they had really good food. And then, as I said, the Jameson Distillery and, other walking around. We were lucky it didn't rain so much that day. Yesterday, there was a 0% probability of rain in Dublin. And I believed them. So I got stuck in the rain yesterday and spent the day here, and then went over to the Ferryman, the pub right across the street, which is really nice. Very, so I've been in, I think, about 6 pubs since I got here, which was not bad for 3 days, right?
Are you a Guinness drinker? Do you like Guinness?
I hate to say it. It's not my favorite, guys. I had one Guinness, but I prefer, is it called, I had an ale that it looks like it's
Smiddix.
Smiddix, but it's written
Wicks.
Smithwick's,
Yeah,
but you call it Smiddix. I like that more than Guinness is beautiful, and the head is creamy and gorgeous looking, but it always tastes. We're used to more carbonation in my lesser developed beer drinking country, so it always tastes undercarbonated to me. But that's my own ignorance, folks. Guinness is great. It's just I haven't caught up with how great it is yet, but I'm going to work on it.
Are you going to do a bit of exploring around the country after?
Yes, we're going to be driven on the wild Atlantic way. I'm afraid to drive in this country because, the whole road-changing thing. My brain is just too impermeable to new information for me to be driving in this country. So we'll be toured around for about 3 days. Then I'm going to visit a friend in Galway and fly home. I think I fly home on the 1st, and I start shooting on the 3rd in Toronto for Starfleet Academy, which I'm very excited about.
That's amazing. So I want to talk to you about, before you became an actor, you went to Yale, and it was almost preordained when it comes to the Doctor and Voyager that you did pre-med, is that right?
Yes, my childhood ambition was to be a doctor, and I went to Yale and was pre-med, but I had always acted in high school, and I continued to act in college, which is very hard to do when you're a biology major, because you have those labs a couple times a week that are 3 or 4 hours long, and then you had dinner, and then you had to go to play rehearsal for 2 or 3 hours. So you start your studying sometime at 10 o'clock at night, even though you had a class at 8 in the morning. It was a little hard to try to do both, but I was in a production at Yale that just turned my head around as far as wanting to try to be an actor. Someone in the Yale School of Music had seen me in an undergraduate musical performance at the end of my freshman year and insisted that he wanted to cast me in Leonard Bernstein's Mass. I didn't know anything about the Mass. It was an original piece of music Bernstein wrote for the opening of the Kennedy Center in Washington, which is a giant performance arts center where they give awards to great people in the arts every year. Well, anyway, they opened it in 1970 or 71, and Leonard Bernstein was commissioned to write this. And it's the Leonard Bernstein's Mass is a theater piece, but it has every kind of music in it. It has some Broadway musical style music. It has classical music. It has a full mixed chorus of adults. It has a boys' choir. It has a rock and roll band. Every kind of music, because Bernstein used different musical idioms to tell an allegorical story about religion and how religion starts out as a pure impulse for someone to have a relationship with God, but the moment you organize religion, there are inherent dangers in corrupting the original relationship with God. That was his theme, I think. And I played the corrupt religious figure in the show. There was the celebrant is the real, true religious figure, and I played this sort of gospel preacher who was sort of a parody of an evangelical character who was like, it feels good to, let's all kind of get excited and jazzed up about, my song was called God Said. And I had a very flashy Broadway number. Bernstein came to see the whole show, but liked my performance so much he wanted me to play the lead in the show, the celebrant, the true religious character, but I couldn't ever do that. It was like an operatic role. So in any case, our school production, with some changes, was brought to premiere the work in Austria, in Vienna, Austria. We were filmed for public television, and overnight I was a biology student at 19 who was getting all this attention for his performance in the show. Leonard Bernstein said to me, "What are you going to do with your life?" And I said, "I'm studying to be a doctor." And he said, "I'm surprised to hear that. You have such natural energy on stage, not phony Broadway energy. I would think you would want to be an actor." And I said, "Mr. Bernstein, would you tell my mother?" And he did. Opening night, I shuttled my mother over to meet Leonard Bernstein, and he told my mother he thought I should be an actor, and bang, like that, I was out of pre-med. So I made a deal with my mother. If I wasn't successful by 25, I would go back and pick up my pre-med credits and go to medical school. But by 24, I had my second leading role on Broadway, so I was out of the woods. In fact, my career peaked at 24, folks. I mean, at 24, I had the honor of playing the great Jack Lemmon's son in his return to Broadway. He'd been a movie star for 25 years and hadn't been on Broadway in the interim after being discovered in the Broadway theater before, and that's what brought him to Hollywood. And I played his son when he returned to Broadway in a play called Tribute, and that's what brought me to California, doing that show again. So my career between 23 and 24 was so exciting, it's been hard to match it ever since. But the rest of it, has been like this until today, and now I feel here in Dublin that I'm as successful as I felt at 24. Thank you.
Definitely well-deserved round of applause there. So you talk about being on stage and then musicals. How did the singing come about for you? Because we know how good of a singer you are, but how did that come about?
I studied singing really briefly at Yale, just one semester, because it was not offered for course credit, you had to pay. And at the time, I think a half-hour singing lesson was $40. And at that time, that was a lot of money to me in 1971. So I did study for one semester. I sang in the Mass. I couldn't hit the B flat, which is a pretty high note for a guy who's basically a baritone. I couldn't hit it. So the musical director, without telling Leonard Bernstein, took the song down one step. But all of the music in the show ran together. So he literally had to change, without asking permission, he had to change the segue from the song before to modulate down one step for me. And apparently, I thought at the time he'd asked permission. Apparently, he slipped it by Maestro, and Maestro didn't notice that they brought it down, so my top note was an A flat, and that I could get out. It's still my performance. I've tweeted little bits of it because it was filmed. If you want to see me at 19 years old, you can go to my Twitter feed or my Instagram feed and see me with a giant curly afro that was my own hair at the time. My head is about 2 feet in diameter, and it's all hair. When I started to lose my hair, my mother said, "Well, you've had enough hair for one life." So, anyway, so yes, I had this giant mane of hair, and I dance and move around like completely uninhibited because I didn't know what I was doing. But so I sang in the show, and I remember that I was offered Leonard Bernstein's musical Candide. You ever heard of Candide? It was a musical that he wrote in the late 50s. It's sort of a comic operetta based on, I cannot remember. I mean, it's based on the book. I mean, there was an ensemble of actors who played all different little characters in telling the story of Candide. And I was offered a part. I would have gone to Broadway if I was willing to drop out of Yale. And I knew it would break my mother's heart. So I turned it down. And I'm glad I did, because if I'd left Yale before I graduated and gone to Broadway and been in a musical, I was not a good dancer. So I really wasn't good enough to make it. I would have been in a Broadway show in the chorus, but not a good enough dancer to really have a career working my way up in musical theater. So I thought, well, I'll be in a musical someday, and I wasn't in a musical for 25 years later. After turning down that opportunity, my first 2 Broadway shows were straight plays. I mean, they were both had a lot of comedy in them, but no singing. And so I wasn't in a musical until after Star Trek got me singing again. And then after Star Trek ended, I did several musicals after that.
Do you prefer, when it comes to your career, you've done it all, really, in terms of stage, TV, movies, voiceover. Do you prefer the stage? Is that where, because you started there, do you prefer that, or does it really matter, just once you get to perform?
The stage is really acting was acting on stage for thousands and thousands of years, and in the last 150 years, it's been acting in film too. So it's a more recent art form. Movies were invented in the last decade, I guess, of the 19th century. So we've only had movies around for about, from the very primitive first short reels for about 140 years, I think, by my count. So I think that acting is really acting on stage, and then film and television acting is sort of a parallel art form. It has things in common, but they're very different things, different skill set involved in acting for the camera. So yes, I still love to work on stage. I've done a lot of live stage work locally in California recently in sort of a theater group that I'm part of. So I still work on stage because I think that it keeps your chops up, keeps your memory up to memorize. I did an original musical recently that was quite dramatic, played the lead in it. So that is, I think, really good for an actor to always go back to the stage to keep your skill set up. But the wonderful thing about working in television, or especially specifically in a franchise like Star Trek, is that your performance is shared with people all over the world. So you get a much bigger audience than you can ever get working in the theater. And also, uh, because there's something about science fiction and Star Trek in particular that fans like you will watch it over again, and new generations of people will watch work that I did on Star Trek nearly 30 years ago now. And that's very gratifying for an actor to know that your work is still being appreciated years on. And now that they're taking me out of holographic mothballs, I'll be on a new Star Trek series, creating new work that people will be watching, hopefully long after I'm gone. So there's certainly, you reach a much bigger audience in film and television, and the work lives on after you. So there are great advantages and attractions, I think, to actors for working in all different media. And as you get older, the discipline of working on stage, of being on Broadway and doing 8 shows a week, is pretty tough. It cuts into your lifestyle. You can't go, you get 1 or 2 weeks off for the year, and you're always on stage every night of the week, except maybe you do a Sunday matinee and end your week, and you got Sunday night off all of Monday, and then you're back at the theater on Tuesday. Most theater schedules. So it really controls your life a lot.
Doing stage, do you find can it become monotonous to do the same thing over and over again, or you just love the performance?
It depends on the role. I've been very lucky. Most of my theater experiences, I played the lead in the show, or the second lead when I did the play with Jack Lemmon. So, but yes, as an older actor, if I went back and did a Broadway musical, say, and I had maybe 1 song to sing and only 2 scenes, you're spending, if the show is 2 hours and 15 minutes long, you're sitting backstage in your dressing room for an hour and a half, and I think that discipline can get harder. I'm guessing when you're older. If I work on the stage, I like it to be a really challenging role, so that I feel if I'm investing that much time of my life at this stage of my life, that I feel that it's really rewarding and fulfilling to play it.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about some of your roles. We have varying degrees of people who are different fans of different genres. So the first one I want to ask you is Gremlins 2. The fact that we're getting laughs there straight away. How was Gremlins 2 for
Well,
you?
the relationship between me and the female gremlin didn't work out. We couldn't decide on how to raise the children. Because I'm a Roman Catholic and she was a gremlin. Anyway, it was fun. I love Joe Dante from the first time I worked with him in The Howling, which was, I played a maniac werewolf killer. But during camera breaks, Joe would see me cutting up, singing, making jokes. So he realized then, by the way, Joe had seen me on Broadway in the play with Jack Lemmon. And my character in the play with Jack Lemmon had a big scene where I yelled at my father, Jack Lemmon. I was angry at him. So I had to be very emotionally risible. And there was something in that I think made him want me to audition for his werewolf movie. So that's how I happened to be called in for The Howling, was he'd seen me on Broadway play an emotionally explosive character. So Joe cast me in The Howling. I think I did Explorers after that. And then Inner Space, where most of my character was made up. We could talk about that later if you want. But then by the time Gremlins 2 came along, the character was pretty much a bad guy, But Joe gives you great freedom as an actor, and because he already trusted me, I'd worked with him by that point 4 or 5 times. I told him I wanted to really look put together. So they made a $4,000 wig for me, so I had this very coiffed 1980s style hair. I said I wanted to be I wanted to really dehumanize all the people who worked for me. So I had, anybody remember, I had a barcode scanner in the movie where instead of learning, if you were one of my 2,000 employees, I had no interest in learning your name. I would scan a little barcode that you had on you. These were all my ideas. And the poor prop men had to make a portable computer with a barcode. I said I wanted to open like a switchblade as a scanner. And all of these things no other director would they had to manufacture hundreds of little barcode badges for every extra in the movie just because of my crazy little idea. None of that was in the script. The guy was just an unpleasant employer. He was kind of a dick. But I wanted to do stuff that made him more unpleasant in a more imaginative way. Because I knew that when the gremlin, the little female gremlin kind of got the best of me, tearing my clothes off and stuff like that it would be more fun for the audience if I started out very put together in beautiful clothes with beautiful hair. The more messed up I got, the funnier it would be. So Joe has always been the best director to work for because he listens to your ideas and decides immediately if he likes it. And in almost all of the roles I did with him, I made a major contribution in some way to the character. And I have other stories from the other movies if you're interested, because he listens and he loves actors. And when he hires you, he's hiring not just what he's seen you do before, he's hiring your imagination and your contribution.
You have had a lot of sci-fi roles. There's a lot of different ones that you've got. We're going to go straight into it. Star Trek Voyager. You originally didn't audition for the Doctor.
Yes, I was called to audition for the Doctor. And at the time I was working in a theater in Los Angeles I always wanted to work at, the Mark Taper Forum in downtown LA. It's a very prestigious theater. And I'd waited 20 years to get a job there. And I was cast in a lead role in a show. And we were in the week, the show was about to go into previews. So we're in very long rehearsals. They're called 10 out of 12s. You work 10 hours out of a 12-hour day. And they are teching the show. The sound, all the lights are being set. So I was in the middle of tech week, and my agent called and said, there's this new Star Trek series, they want you to audition. And my first words were, they're not going to put me in a Star Trek series. I don't know why I said that. And then, because I turned out to be wrong, by the way. And I said, Joe, I'm working. I said, I'm sorry, my agent, Peter Young. I said, Peter, I'm working. I have a job. I am not available. He said, well, lie. That was his first command as an agent. And he said, why don't you just go during your lunch break? So I read the script and I thought, this character is colorless, humorless, a computer program of a doctor. Now, does that sound like a bucket of fun? No. So, but I read the script at the advice of a friend of mine. I was all set to cancel the audition, and a friend of mine who was auditioning for another role said, oh, the script is great. You've got to read it. There's also this funny character called Neelix, who's an alien. So I read the script, and I thought, Neelix looks like fun. And I'm thinking, it's Star Trek. I don't know much about it, but I know that Leonard Nimoy had little pointy ears, so maybe it won't be much of a makeup. So I go in and I audition for Neelix at my own request, and they love me, and I went down to the wire to play Neelix. The story I heard afterwards is that literally the producers wanted me to play Neelix, and the studio wanted Ethan Phillips. Now, Ethan Phillips is he'd already been a friend of mine for 15 years. I did not know he was my competition. I went in, I read, I almost got it. My agent called, I tested for it. And I said to my agent, I don't know how big the makeup is going to be. Can you ask them? And they said, ask them how long I'll be in the makeup chair every day. And my agent said, I asked them, they're going to get back to me. And they called back and they said, more than 15 minutes. And they're right, 3.5 hours is more than 15 minutes. But I was a little dicey about the makeup. I was a little concerned because I'd done some heavy makeup roles before, and I'm a little claustrophobic at that time. Now I'm worse. But I tested anyway. I didn't get it. And thank God I didn't get it, because I would have spent I computed it, about 5,500 hours sitting in the makeup chair. But here's the really impressive thing to me. The producers came back after that, after I tested, after I almost got another role, and said, would he consider reading for the original role? We were interested in him, the Doctor, because I think they said to my agent, there's something about his voice. And my agent asked me, I said, look, I don't get it, but I'll try. And I went in, I'm the only actor in Voyager who read only one time for the role that he got. Even Kate read 3 or 4 times, I think. I read once, because they'd already seen me 2 or 3 times for another character. When I went to the audition, our now deceased and wonderful producer, Michael Piller, said, Bob, he said, we've all seen Bob before. I'm in a room, a relatively small room with like 16 people watching me. The casting director is so exhausted. Her name is Pam, I can't believe I don't remember her last name. Pam, normally Junie Lowry Johnson cast all the Star Trek shows. She had just had twin babies. So this other casting director, very successful, and she was exhausted. They had seen 900 actors for the Doctor, that's what I was told. So when I tested, I'm reading with her, and she looked like she'd been through the mill. Okay, I did something you never do at a network audition, ever, with a final audition. I ad-libbed. You don't do that, right? But I heard they wanted the character to be funny. I had 9 lines, and I didn't find it funny. The first time I ad-libbed, the line I had in the script is, I scan a crewman, I say, your injuries are not serious, you can return to your station. So I scanned the air and said to the casting director, your injuries are not serious, you can return to casting. And she looked at me in shock and burst into laughter, right? And then the room started to laugh too. This is a crazy thing to do. I broke the fourth wall, right? Then the last line in the audition, the doctor's been left alone at sickbay and his program is still active and he has nothing to do. And he says to the computer, I believe someone has failed to terminate my program. And after that, I ad-libbed the following line. I took a long deadpan look at everyone in the room and I said, I'm a doctor, not a nightlight. Got a huge laugh, walked out the door, and I was hired within an hour from that. So I basically ripped off DeForest Kelley without realizing it, because I didn't know that was a Star Trek doctor gag. I just thought it was a funny line, right? Because he was made of light, right? So I thought if you leave something, turned on that has no use, that's made of light, I just thought that was a funny idea. And so when I met DeForest Kelley, within a year of getting the role at our first convention together, and he went on stage, by the way, and said, damn it, Jim, I'm a doctor, not a hologram, which I thought was cute. When I met him, I said, Mr. Kelley, my character kind of pays homage to your character. He went, oh, you mean you steal from me? And I went, yeah, pretty much.
When it comes to the Doctor and Zimmerman as well, you're in multiple shows. So you were Deep Space Nine, Voyager, you were in Prodigy, and now Starfleet Academy. The Doctor has some serious legs on him. He tends to be there, and he's one of those characters that you really want to see. So is it exciting for you to be coming back? You did Prodigy, obviously, and that was fantastic. But now live action again. Is it exciting to come back to that?
Yes, of course it is. I mean, it's scary. I hope that that you guys will still embrace the character 30 years on. When you have you've created a legacy by doing something already, that there's always a little part of you in the back of your head that's afraid of damaging that by coming back and revisiting a character. But I am optimistic. I really enjoy the writing that they've shared with me for the first season episodes. I'm really excited about the cast. Holly Hunter, been a huge fan of her forever, playing the Chancellor of Starfleet Academy. Our first season villain, Paul Giamatti, one of my favorite actors, who also happens to be bald and also went to Yale, like me. And then this amazing cast of talented young people playing the cadets. So I'm super optimistic. My feeling is I think the show is going to be a hit. I just hope that my participation in it, because you guys already know me in Star Trek. You don't know most of the other cast members. You don't know, and you may know them as actors, but you don't know them in Star Trek. So I'm hopeful that you'll all embrace the return of the Doctor. But it also has from Discovery, Tig Notaro, who I'm a huge fan of. Can't wait to meet her. Oded Fehr, who I've already met, lovely man, terrific actor, and Mary Wiseman from Discovery, who I've also met, and I'm looking forward to working with her. So, I'm very excited to get started, and as I said, I'll be starting 2 days after I get back from visiting Ireland. So you guys are, if you want to give me, if you want to raise my level of confidence, you can all give me a big good luck right now. Thank you.
I don't think anyone is going to dispute this, but I think having you in that show is just going to make it that much more special, and I think everyone agrees here. What we're going to do now is, if anyone has a question, we have a number of microphones around the room. Please don't be shy. Come up and ask a question to Robert. We have one over here.
Hi, Robert. I was wondering if I could ask you about your work in Legend, how you found working with Ridley and Tom, how the makeup process was with Rob Bottin, and is it true that there is an additional scene that you filmed that never made the theatrical or the director's cut?
Thank you for the question. Ridley Scott is a genius, so I was very excited to work with him. When I met him to audition, and I screwed up my face into this really witchy performance and did the voice and everything, he looked at me at the end and said, "Well, you barely need the makeup, do you?" Which I guess was a compliment. Rob Bottin I'd worked with in The Howling at that point, and also, I think Explorers. I think I'd done Howling and Explorers. I don't remember the order. And he's a genius. I mean, an amazing creative talent. And Tom Cruise, who was only 19, I think at the time, was really super hard worker, very gracious to me. The scene itself in the American release was cut down considerably from the director's cut, but no, there is no additional scene. It just it was shorter in the American version. The original run of the film was something like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I think the studio, frankly, didn't know what to do with a fantasy movie for adults. In other words, my personal theory is if Legend had been made after the Lord of the Rings trilogy and all that, it would have been a bigger hit out of the gate. I think that in the late 80s, nobody thought of a fantasy film that was not for children. I mean, it was way too dark for kids. I thought they didn't know how to market it. They cut it way down to 88 minutes. They took out a gorgeous Jerry Goldsmith score and replaced it with Tangerine Dream. And I love John Anderson. I love his voice. But still, they gave it a techno-pop score when it had this lush, gorgeous orchestral. So I would say that the studio kind of screwed the movie release up in the same way I'm sure Mr. Scott would agree they did when they hacked up Blade Runner. You know, he told me this whole story about how the studio took Blade Runner away from him. They called in all of the most famous directors of the day, Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, to look at the movie and say, how do we fix this movie? And Ridley Scott didn't have the clout at that time. So that he'd already had experience with studios kind of messing with his finished product. Now he is so widely acclaimed and has Final Cut and has for years that the studio can't mess with him that way. So in any case, it was a grueling thing to do. The makeup was hard. I think they could easily have killed me. No, I'm serious. They didn't know what they were doing. I was on a hydraulic, little tiny, I think less than a meter square, a little trap door. I'm in 3 feet of water. Under the steel floor, there's another 16 feet of water. They had bolted. They had what they called a butt pad for me. So they had a pole that was welded to my little 3 foot by 3 foot trap door. A pole that had like a cushioned seat right here. So they would seat belt me in so I could move my body all over the place and still be anchored to this little tiny trap door. However, I heard Ridley Scott talking to the director saying, what I want is this crystal clear pool of water with no, just a mirror-like surface. And then this figure comes emerging out of the water. I heard him say this to the first AD and the camera operator, and I called the AD over, and the AD was this sort of corpulent fellow, and I swear, he had safari shorts and a safari. He might as well have had a pith helmet and a riding crop. He was out of a Rudyard Kipling novel. And I said, I overheard you talking to Mr. Scott. I said, if you lower the trap and wait for the water to start rippling once you've lowered me down, I don't have a breathing apparatus. You're going to have to hold me underwater for a minute or two or three. I said, I'm in a rubber outfit here that takes on water like a sponge. If you lower me below the stage floor, which is 3 feet down, and then these push me up, and I'm on this thing, and my body recoils from the water, if the steel plates of my trap door, I said, you could shear my arm off, or if I go backwards, you could decapitate me. And he said, yes, I suppose you're right. Well, we'd better rehearse this then. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do this. And that's why I'm here today. I mean, literally, we're going to work it out as they go along. It's like, have you guys thought this through? When I realized they didn't know what they were doing, I said, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. I'm not going under the water. And instead, they had a giant bubbling, thing, a bubbler in front of me, and I came up from that, and it worked fine, and they didn't kill me or maim me.
And we're all very thankful for that. Thank you very much for your question. Yourself here.
So, I believe that, this is your first time in Ireland. I have to ask, do you plan on exploring more of Dublin, and do you plan on exploring other counties, such as, say, County Kildare and County Wicklow, et cetera, et cetera?
You may have come in a little late. I've been here 3 times before, but for brief periods of time, and really only in Dublin. So this time, I will be exploring the wild Atlantic Way and the Dingle Peninsula, and a lot of, I can't remember the names, all the cute names of all the towns that I'm supposed to go to in 3 days. Then I'm going to go to Galway, but I'm not going to get to see everything. I only have 6 days.
There is a lot to see.
I know.
For 6 days,
Yeah.
that's a lot to see. Is there anything specific you were looking forward to?
Well, I have a friend in Galway. I'm looking forward to seeing her and her husband, and I just hear that part, the Atlantic coast is gorgeous. I'm hoping to see the cliffs of Moher. Is that right? The cliffs of Moher. Moher.
Did I get that right? I think I got that right.
But on all the names, with the cute names, Dingle and Killarney, and I'm not going to kiss the Blarney Stone, I don't think, because no one's asked me, but I might. I'm already pretty full of Blarney as it is, so I don't know. What is the Blarney Stone? Can someone explain what it is?
I don't know, but you have to kiss it upside down, don't you? Yeah.
You have to go. You have to bend over.
Yeah.
Well,
like
that
this.
alone is going to keep me from doing it. I'm not going to put my back out kissing the damn Blarney Stone.
Thank you very much for your question. Yourself down there.
Hello. You talked about all the contributions you made to your characters, but which character is closer to the person, Robert Picardo?
Well, there are. I think that I have usually played characters that are that start out much less friendly than I am personally. I think if I have a special skill as an actor, it's to play a character that makes a bad first impression, that you don't like at first, and then as you start to understand why he is the way he is, you grow to like him. That to me is the key to playing either a villain or just a character that is interesting. You want the audience to root for that character, to be happier or to be more successful at what they're doing in different ways. When I was on the Wonder Years playing the little boy's gym teacher, I had he was a really uptight, nerdy, paranoid character, but you still liked him for some reason. And I think that's because you're letting the audience in on a secret, why they behave the way they do. For example, the doctor's character never smiled at first, right? He was a first generation of a new technology. He had these supposed emotional subroutines so that he could interact with patients and develop a bedside manner, but they didn't quite work. So the doctor was cranky and irritable. That was the joke. He was an a willful piece of technology. Everyone in the 90s had a home computer by then. And I think that the producers of Star Trek thought it was funny to create a character that's a piece of software that does not behave the way it's supposed to. In the same way your computer was never doing exactly what's wrong with my computer? Is it a hardware problem? Is it a software problem? All of that was in the air in the 90s. And I think that making a technology that had a mind of its own, that didn't behave, that had a bad attitude, was a funny idea. And at first, I didn't really understand what the joke of the Doctor was. I mean, I was as surprised as anyone when I got a big laugh going in the pilot, medical tricorder. I didn't know why that was that funny. But my character, my face, there's something about my face doing that character. My children explained to me later in life. They said, Dad, my kids were really young when Star Trek first came on. My younger daughter was less than 5 years old, and when she saw the first episode, she said, Daddy's so mad. Why Daddy's so mad? And I said, well, dear, they pay Daddy to be mad. But she wasn't used to me not smiling and looking. And when my kids got older, they said, Dad, the key to your success on Star Trek is your resting bitch face. The fact that when your face is relaxed, you don't look happy. And I think that there's a certain, my eyes are very dark, brown, and they just, I look a little bit unapproachable and a little unfriendly when my face is just at rest. And I think that helped. But the real key, what I started to understand was I faked my way through the pilot. I didn't get what the character was about. But in the very first episode, after the pilot, there's a scene where the Kess character has told Captain Janeway she wants to create a hydroponics bay because we're going to try to maximize our energy conservation on the ship. So what if we grew, instead of replicating vegetables, we actually grew them? So she comes to sickbay and she needs soil samples. And the doctor proceeds to explain how he is the most incredible compendium of everything humanity knows about medicine in the 24th century. He's got the combined experiences of 24 Starfleet officers. He's got the combined information of 4,000 medical textbooks and this and that. And then he said, but yes, let me get your dirt. So you finally understood that he was the star in baseball, which I know is not a big sport here, but he was like the star relief pitcher who was brought in to pitch batting practice. He was the guy, he's the smartest thing going in medicine, and now every trivial science and medical demand on the day-to-day basis on the ship was going to be his problem because the real doctor, the organic doctor, was killed in the pilot. So he had a bad attitude. And then it was compounded by the fact that the crew didn't seem to respect him and treated him like a walking tricorder. And most importantly, any member of the crew could turn him on or off like a light switch, and that pissed him off, that he had no moment-to-moment control over his existence, his virtual existence, that anyone could leave him running with nothing to do, or anyone could turn him off in the middle of something. So I finally understood that he had a chip on his shoulders because he was not getting the respect that he felt he deserved. And that was my key into the character, that I'm the smartest guy in the room and nobody realizes it.
There we go. Thank you very much. Over here.
So, Robert, how are you doing? Thanks
Very
for
well,
coming.
thank you.
Simon's my name. I'm actually a doctor myself. So myself and the brother used to watch you in Star Trek Voyager. He's down there. He's in IT now at the moment, doing all sort of fancy stuff with IT. But anyways, when I was in medical school, Dr. Cox, yourself, and Dr. House were the three people who we were told not to have the bedside manner off. So it's great. It was great to see you sort of defrost over the couple of seasons. But look, I just want to come up here, give you my gratitude and recommendation. Instead of the Smithwick's and the Guinness, right? If you don't like Guinness, put the head of the Guinness on the Smithwick's. Have a pint of Smeshel.
Smeshel?
Pint of special.
Special.
So
when
if you go in, you say you ask for a Smittix with a Guinness head.
The best of both worlds.
A Smittix
Doctor's
with
advice.
a Guinness head. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And that's coming from a medical professional.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can consider it a prescription of
Yeah,
sorts.
well, look, if you give me €50, I'll give you a prescription. Or a free autograph, barter.
I just want to let you know this is being live streamed, so
Okay, disregard that. Irish Medical Council.
Really,
No,
that-
but thank you so much. Appreciate
Thank
it
you.
so much.
Thank you,
And
Doc.
you
Thank
put 110% into everything, even the cameo for my brother's 40th birthday. You're spectacular.
Thank
and your
you,
Kate
Doc.
Mulgrew impression was amazing.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Yourself here.
How's it going, Robert? I'm just wondering, you started so many great sci-fi shows, like Voyager, Stargate, Atlantis, Orville. I'm just wondering, what was it like? Was Voyager your favourite, or was it compared to like with the other shows?
Which one was my favorite?
Which was your favourite, and how was it to work on the other shows compared to Voyager?
Well, Star Trek, during my era of Star Trek, it was very, very closely controlled. In my era of Star Trek, you were not allowed to change a word without permission. Nothing, not a comma. Even if something was wrong, I would call and say, this is grammatically incorrect, what I'm saying. And they said, well, they said it's colloquial. I said, wait a minute, my grammar is programmed, right? I would be programmed with correct grammar. I had to argue certain points. But I learned that you never did that while we were shooting. If I had I learned in the first season, it's okay to be spontaneous on Star Trek as long as you're spontaneous 5 days in advance, which means you never said, can I make this joke or can I do that while you were shooting? You had to pre-think it. I'll give you an example, all right? First season, it actually aired in the second season. By the end of the first season, we did an episode called Projections. It's the first one where the great Dwight Schultz played Barclay on Voyager. In the show, the doctor wakes up, he's activated on Voyager, and it turns out that he's the only real organic being on Voyager, and all of Voyager is a hollow projection. Does anyone remember this episode? It was called Projections. Okay, so Dwight Schultz, first time I meet him, he has a scene, and in trying to demonstrate to me that I'm human and not a hologram, he slaps me in the face, right? And he says, there, you feel pain. If you were, a hologram, you wouldn't feel pain. Well, in rehearsal, when he slaps me in the face, I slapped him back. Crew exploded in laughter. Jonathan Frakes, who's directing our show for the very first time, exploded in laughter. And then he looked at me and said, I don't know, can we do that? I said, wait a minute, you've been doing this shit for 7 years and you're asking me? He said, no, we got to get permission. So I went and I called Jerry Taylor, one of our 3 producers, on the phone. And I said, we just rehearsed the scene with Barclay, and when he slaps me, I slapped him back. She said, no. I said, no, was it no? She said, no. I said, no. She said, no, it's bad for your character. It's violent. I said, no. I said, no. I said, actually, it's quite, no. I said, Jerry, I said, it's not violent. It's petulant. It's reflexive. It's like 2 children in a sandbox. And she said, no, it's not. Wouldn't let me shoot it. And this conversation went on. And meanwhile, 87 people, the whole crew, all the other actors are sitting there twiddling their thumbs for 20 minutes. Thousands of dollars of production money are washing down the drain. And I'm saying, please, please, please. And finally, after a lengthy conversation, she said, shoot the scene as it is. And then after you've got it, you have my permission to do 1 take where okay. So we shoot it. It's the funniest moment, in my opinion. Dwight Schultz's reaction to my slapping him in the face is the single funniest moment in 7 years of Voyager. He does, at my count, a quadruple take. 4 different expressions. You can't watch it without laughing. It immediately went in the show. Did anyone ever mention it to me? Did anyone ever say, I'm glad we did that, it was great, it was funny? No, nothing was ever mentioned. But I learned a lesson that day. Never, ever wait till the last moment. Well, I did it the way an actor is supposed to. We're supposed to react in the moment. We're supposed to be spontaneous. You just can't do that on Star Trek, at least in my era. You had to pre-think any idea you had and argue it in advance. Whether it was a joke line, I got many jokes in Star Trek, but I always called 5 days in advance, suggested the lines, they wrote them down. If they appeared in the subsequent rewrite pages of the script before we started shooting, if one of my lines came up with an asterisk next to it, this is a new line, that meant they liked the joke. Nothing was ever said. You just submitted them. In Message in a Bottle, I got 3 jokes in the show, including my favorite joke I ever made up for the character. EMH Mark II, Andy Dick, who was crazy to work with, is right over me. And the doctor is piloting a starship. He's piloting a Romulan ship, and he's being fired on by Starfleet because they don't know that a Starfleet member is piloting the ship, right? I've taken over the Romulan ship. My character, while he's nervously piloting the ship, says to EMH Mach 2, "Stop breathing down my neck." The next 2 lines were my suggestion, okay? "Stop breathing down my neck." And he goes, "My breathing is merely a simulation." And I say, "So is my neck. Stop it anyway." That's pretty darn good Hollywood. Isn't that the Fraser and Niles of outer space right there? But I learned a lesson early on: just suggest in advance, never at the last moment, because what production didn't like were those thousands of dollars of wasted time while you were arguing something about the script that could have been done in advance. Now, Stargate, completely loosey-goosey. Once you shot the scene, can I do it again and say another line? Yes, please, go on. It was a completely different seat of the pants, have fun, make something up, and so it was a whole different ethos on that set. And also in, I found the Orville, if you wanted to try something different, that was also, but the original Star Trek was really carefully controlled because their thought was we cannot allow the actors to change the words because it might feel contemporary, and we want it to feel like it's in the future, so no contemporary expressions at all. In the newer Star Treks, I think that has changed, and they allow for the fact that we can let a younger audience in by speaking, in having some contemporary expression. At least that's my experience. I may be wrong, but in our show, nothing could ever smack of the present day. It all had to be this future speak.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. We have time for a couple more. Okay, so yourself down the back there.
Since you were talking about musicals earlier, what is your favorite musical or theater show you've seen and been in?
That I've seen or been, well, I mean, I'm a great fan of the classic Guys and Dolls. I think they don't make them like that anymore. I haven't been in a really new musical. Even when I've been in it's always been about an older subject. I have played the lead in a couple of musicals, but I like the classic old ones. I love playing the lead character in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum. But I haven't done a really new musical, but I admire people like Anthony Rapp, who was on Discovery, who, of course, created the role in the one based on La Boheme. I'm sorry, Rent. And he's a great cabaret performer. He can stand up and sing songs from that show and other Broadway shows, and he's what I call a modern Broadway talent. I'm sort of old school musical theater. So I can't really answer your question, but I would say if I could watch a musical tonight, I would watch Guys and Dolls, either the movie or a great production of it.
Thank you very much. I think we've time for 2 more. Just yourself.
Thanks very much, Robert. We love having you here. You come from the Italian-American family, and I think your father's family originally came from Campania initially. I just want to say, how high would be your standard of the Italian language? And do you ever regret having the chance to play or perform in the Italian language if your standard of Italian was high enough?
My German, I speak pretty good German from having studied it. I was not able, there was no opportunity for me to speak, to learn Italian growing up in my school. By the time I got to college, I didn't want to, it was too much pressure at Yale to start first year in a language course. So I deeply regret I never learned to speak Italian. Even though all four of my grandparents were born in Italy, my parents' generation were of the we must assimilate, so no Italian was spoken in the house. So even my parents, who were first generation born, barely spoke Italian. They understood it, but didn't speak it. So I really regret that I don't speak Italian. But if you saw the movie Confess Fletch, I play an Italian in it, just with heavily, with a heavy Italian accent. So I do a good Italian accent because it's in my ear, but I don't speak very well.
Thank you very much. I get your question out. It's going to have to be a quick one because I'm getting the signal.
Yes, I got to go after this.
Very quick thing. I was going to ask how Star Trek. Did you have any great fun playing the Leprechaun? Recording an album with.
Your mic is cutting in and out, so I didn't hear the question.
I was just wondering if you had any great fun playing the Leprechaun in that episode of Supernatural.
Yes.
And would you consider recording an album, considering how great you sing?
I have made a couple of CDs in the past, vanity CDs. I love being on Supernatural because it was fun to play a leprechaun. And as I said, Stargate was a looser set to work on than Star Trek, but I loved both experiences. And I think that's it for me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Robert Picardo!